Greetings, everyone! Welcome to Dracovin Empire. Are you ready to dive back into the world of Golarion, the world setting of the Pathfinder role-playing game system? I hope you are, and you're ready to join me as I open up a gate and take you there. Your host and guide in Golarion, Dracovin. Remember, of course, to give a little bit of tip to me, like, subscribe, and bell, what you think about today's topic. Because we're traveling to a region where we're going to be talking about an ancient empire. So if you're ready, take my hand. The gate is open. It's merely time to travel to Golarion once more. We've arrived. We're going to be going into some ancient ruins here, places where old dangers lie, things left over from an empire long since extinct. Yes, we're going to be talking about the Jistka Imperium. I hope you're ready to learn all about them. Now, if you do want to dive deeper beyond what we speak of today, there are a number of sources. The campaign settings and Inner World Guide both provide some basic information, especially in regions where Jistka existed. But Lost Kingdoms is probably your best bet, followed a little bit by World Guide too. Those other three will give you some information, but yes, Lost Kingdoms is your best bet for the most up-to-date kind of big picture view of Jistka, or the Jiskans. So who are these people? Here's some of their ancient constructs rising from the desert as a danger. It's a normal kind of thing for them. Thing is, they were technologically adept and advanced and expansionistic, and they were the first major civilization after Earthfall. When the Age of Darkness, the fall of Aslant, of Thessalonian power, this was the first empire on the world, historically, to rise at that back end of the Age of Darkness. And it lasted for quite a long time, over 700 years. We know, date-wise, that's approximately negative 4120 AR to around 2764 AR. But again, the exact time of the height, about 700 of those years, I would say, like, the back end of it, was the true depths of their civilization. So they existed from before then, and in that territory. But really what we know as the Jistka Imperium kind of grew up in that period. The evolution of a civilization. They conquered a large region of both northern Garun, southern Avastia, Avestan. I keep saying it incorrectly. So they had a pretty big region, and their language isn't quite forgotten, Jistka. It's still you could still probably figure out how to speak it, but it is the basis of the alphabets of modern languages of Skal, Parisian, and Talvain. That shows its influence within the Avestan. They kind of conquered the Chilaxian region, northern Garun, especially in northwestern Garun. Anyway, it was another ancient empire, ancient Osirian, which led to their downfall, leading to destruction, assaulting of many of their cities, razing of many of their cities, throwing their people to the wind, all these kind of things. Their civilization collapsed, crumbled. Let's talk about the history, and the history will be important to this man here, Arsta. But Jistka, as itself, being advanced in science, civil ideologies, history, it still dates back to a legend within their own people. Ancient texts known as the Polyhethera, which basically links their people to these ancestors, mythological hero figures, that many date to the Age of Darkness. These were the first humans to emerge from the caves' productive dwellings, went into the bleak realm that was the Age of Darkness at the back end of it, and began to rebuild civilization. Scattered tribes. One of the early heroes is a clever and ruthless hero, Tadana. Basically, she got together her squabbling tribe, and according to the legends, saw that there was an Aslanti city, basically on the shores of the Arcadian Ocean, who had survived Earthfall, and had been there for 1,000 years. But of course, their technology, their support wasn't there, they were falling apart, they were weakened, and basically, Tidandra and these tribes that she had united were like, we're going to take that over as a place. Oh, there's people there. Yeah, these survivors of Aslanti that were supposed to be there, no match for them. They were killed off. The citadel itself, in its bad shape, was raided. Books, furniture, things that they could carry off. Here's where the problem that came in. These people, as they were, literate. This was just strange magical scratches. So, according to these legends, they basically threw these things into a cave. The cave of Tiandra. A place to keep it all together. And there it sat for generations until that period I said, around that 4160 where we 4160, 4120, but this is 4160 negative 4160 AR, where we start seeing things with the arrival of our nice young man Ariston. But he also came there with his older brother Ajanos. Basically, Ajanos snatched up some stuff that was going to use for kindling from the cave. Ariston knew it was important. They got to a fight. Ariston killed his brother on accident. But with the death, he gained the ability to read the ancient scrolls. The text here is a divine favor, an elder god that sort of smiled upon murder. Basically, who knows? But it's said that in killing his brother, he gained the ability to read this stuff and learned about the ancient civilization that had been there. Again, there wasn't a lot of substance. It was fragmented. It was just chunks of knowledge of Aslanti that had basically been raided by some people that didn't understand anything. Regardless of this side of the story, again, this is a mythological story for the Jistka people. With the help of one of his friends, Stos, and his wife, Nura, he built a ship. He sailed around the region, basically following the texts. He learned about, the Shadowbound warriors of ancient Niddle, the sky symbols of the dwarves, met a lot of the peoples and Bastian and Grun that were existed, made, allies, friends along the way, went on many a journey, outlined in, of course, his collection of books, his collected stories that I mentioned, and the Pathfinder. Again, it's mythological stories. Even people in the Imperium took it with a grain of salt. A lot of these. Anyway, eventually he traveled the plains too, things like the Eternal City of Access, which basically inspired his plans for the empire he would form. He returned home into what the forming of the empire is, negative 4120, with his allies, his foreign allies, the place where he left his wife behind when he traveled the plains. He basically constructed a city there, the capital of the Jistka Imperium. So that was the tale that was the founding of the Imperium. The first heralds of the civilization post the Age of Darkness. Now, for its government, it was imperialistic monarchy. It had expansionism, technological advancement, and a lot of bloodletting. Rulers were called the Imperantite. I'm going to try to butcher that one. Basically, an emperor. I have to say emperor because I'm very bad at saying that one. But Imperantite, the first one being Ariston, our good boy here. Bloodletter and the violent overthrower of regions. But after him, it was basically dignified military officers, members of the magistrate, this basically court of individuals. The Olirant, the eldest, most high-ranking officials, would choose the next ruler of the Imperium at the death of the previous one. Thanks to the planar travels, the magic-wielding magistrates made pacts with other ruling allies, particularly genies. Keep that in mind. That's going to be important. And the borders spread and their influence did. So, yeah. This is where we get a split between the two major factions, because we have the magisters, magicians, the bureaucrats, if you will, and then you have the artificers, who are making elaborate mechanisms, golem guardians for the Imperium. And this is the middle period where the faction split really occurs, the magistrates and the artificers. We find the magistrates in northern Garun, that's their primary source of power, and the artificers in the Jalaxian region of southern Avestan. The magisters had a little bit more of the upper hand, basically just politically in the clash for power with extraplanar allies. The artificers, focusing on manufacture of golems and war machines, didn't really have the same political influence, but certainly did have a lot of influence. So there are these two factions, but one isn't as political as the other, so it's not as in charge. So, yeah. Genies were very easy to summon, and the Freets were like Shiantans, especially in northern Garun, for various reasons that we could explore in other places, but that was one of the reasons the Magisters settled that way. They could control these outsiders. And there were warnings that these outsiders were dangerous to control and summon. The warnings were very right, but the Magisters didn't listen. The Artificers then continued to build the Golem Works in the southern Avestan regions. They had their own caste system of different influence, and these were priest artificers, so there was a very religious connotation to it. And they could also still connect with the outer planes and such. Blessing it with elemental powers, these powerful golems that were created. And there would definitely be, like, religious connotations. Things like the Imperium's legendary ivory batons, which controlled automated troops, were created during this time. Some powerful artifacts, basically. This rift between the two sides had an effect on the nation. Turns out, when you have two factions that are competing with each other, it's not great, because it's spread throughout the society. Things become a lot more hereditary. It wasn't meant to be. But basically, rather than having the groups select replacements, it became more and more that the person that was going to be leaving a position would basically select a replacement for them when they would die or retire. More and more, and it became more blood, family lines, apprentices, connections to kin and children a lot more. So it was forming from a little bit more of, these I earned this position through merit to imperial houses, bloodlines. And it was during this later periods that forging testaments, assassinations became important tools. Yeah. And many of them boasted real or fake connections to royal lineages of the past. And again, scholars are warning, hey, corruption, bad! No one really listened. And the empire spread more. So we were running thin on area control while the government was also weakening. A bad combination. Infighting, weakening of the government and the political structure, and spreading the empire farther. Then we get to 3470. This is the big turning point, I would say, for the Imperium. This is where we can say they've ruled for that kind of 700 years. We've had our 700 years of prosperity. We're going to only maybe exist for 700 more years. But prosperity is ending. Ancient Assyrian rises. Because with the Assyrians coming into play here, they had some people that could compete with them. The Ancient Assyrians, necromancers, the Usuji, they're spellcasters. And they could cause the genies to betray them. Sometimes of their own accord, sometimes by the Usuji magic. Was powerful enough to take over these genies. So the Golem Works basically began to pack with evil outsider planes. Daemons, devils, demons, all the kind of things there. Infusing them into special types of golems that would become powerful beast behemoth golems. War machine to fight against the Assyrians. Elemental soldiers, all kinds of things. The war effort began in full. And there were some great developments that they had during this time, deepening their connections with extraplanar allies, the Rings of the Weary Sky, to control wild elementals. But again, the Pharaoh of the Forgotten Plagues, and his advisors basically captured a particularly powerful fruit that had been the commander from armies of Jistka in 3064, after like 400 years of war. And they turned it into an undead ghoul, Ghul, and make it a carrier of a plague called the Night Plague. In fact, only member of Jistka, widespread and convoluted royal houses. And yep, infighting that had been kind of died away in the last 400 years to fight a real enemy came back and forth. And especially because now you can see what houses were legitimate and which ones were not connected to royal families. And so it was 3 centuries of these rulers eroding more and more infighting, succession wars, and the empire was done. Basically 400 years of war, 400 years more of infighting, and the rulers of ancient Osirian, with help of their newer allies at the end there, the Taratanian League, basically absorbed or obliterated the remaining Jiskin holds in Gurundi. And whatever was left fell apart. Now you may say, what about Avestan, southern part of it? We'll talk about it. They had their own issues that connected up with this entire thing. We'll talk about it. This is them at the height of their power. The territories that we know they held. So, little remains of just... That's an easy way to say it. We do find places that are connected to it that still remain. But, especially in northern Gurun, the Osirians and Taratanian soldiers did a very good job of destroying a lot of their holdings. The Radomi Desert hides much of it. A lot of salted earth. The Path of Salt on the northern shores of Radani, where, once mighty, and the once mighty Jesuin Citadel of the Weary Sky, which is now a crater, after the Lord of Divs himself snuffed out the power from existence. These are marks of the war. The Salt is a place where the war destroyed everything. Now, there were ruins that did remain in the wake of the collapse. They were used by ancient Assyrians to build up their own metropolises, and those would become Rahadomi's many cities afterwards. So, there is still some Jiskin cities that remain technically. They were rebuilt as Osirian, and then when Osirian's empire itself fell, ancient Osirian, and places like the city-states of Rahadomi, yeah, they're based on Jiskin locations. So, in southern Avestan, the Golem works, the forged cities crumbled as the basically masters abandoned the structures, and a series of violent earthquakes towards the ends of it buried many of their temple foundries beneath tons of dirt and rock. So we had a series of natural disasters that had damaged things towards the end there anyway, probably driving away a lot of their people from these places that they had had. There's rumors that, the infernal linking that they had at the end of the period might lead to Cheliax. But the cities of Coriantir and West Crown have pieces of Jiskin architecture in some of their buildings. And we'll talk about some of the connections that exist there now. So, a lot of the ancient empire is gone. Doesn't mean there's not some locations we can talk about. Cave of Tiandra. This legendary cave is debated by historians for Jiskin. They think it's around Manket on the inner sea coast of Rahadum in that region. Where it exactly would have been, where this artifacts would have been hidden, they would have been long moved out by the time of the BT. There are some tunnels, networks, and places in the region there that might kind of link to it. Things that kind of hint at it, but the exact location kind of doesn't exist. Now, there is one city that exists. I'll talk about it a little bit in a moment. But the hanging city of Teskra still exists. It was commissioned by the Impertike Rakindos, I'm probably butchering that one, in negative 4329, who traveled as a youth to the Eternal Oasis next to Jistka's western boundaries and sought to emulate the paradise, the metropolis of their own design. Its stone suspension bridges, marble tunnel networks, very hanging city. It bejeweled pleasure gardens with flocks of mechanical animals, and it was very affluent at the time. But some kind of magic caused the residents to vanish long before the Imperium's collapse, and the place has been relatively abandoned, except for the mechanical beasts and human-like automations that still dwell there. We'll talk about it again in a minute. I'll show the picture of it. Now, there are some cities we can talk about that we know their locations of and what happened to them. But, again, this one still exists. It's one of the few Jiskin places that exist, but it's kind of filled with automations and dangers and haunted and stuff like that, and not a place that just anyone would go to. Yemel. Yemel is an important city to note. I had on the map over there before, but it is a city that was very small. It was the southernmost one. It was kind of out of the way. And basically, the reason why Yemel is important is a team of priest artificers and high magistrates had put together this chest known as the Jistka's Hope. And we're going to send it to Yemel to basically put it in a fortified tomb. The idea was they knew it was the fall of their empire at the end of everything. They were being overwhelmed, and they wanted to hide some of the most precious relics and pieces of history. They got there, but, that's a very important but that I have to kind of say, they were ambushed by the Tarkanian troops. None of their people escaped alive, but none also of the Tarkanians escaped alive. Because when they followed the Jiskin escorts into the tomb where they were laying this at waste, attacked them, the door shut and there were only screams that could be heard. And since then, the city itself was razed, but the tomb remained. And so, yeah, maybe there's some ancient stuff in there, some ancient fortunes. But it's very dangerous because it's sealed away by very powerful, deadly magics. Anyway, the capital of Jistka, Minura. We can talk about that. Remember that path of salt I mentioned? That was Minura. They salted the earth so much so. They utterly destroyed the capital. Burned to the ground, salted the land. 2 million tons of salt eradicate all signs of life that still haunt that coastline today. Few things live there. But beneath the sand and what remains of the salt are monuments. Some of them still now peek out, jet black, out of the ground. And there might be things left over in that ancient city beneath the sand. If you would face it. The city is known, but it's a bleached, deadly land. Very dangerous. Nyserius was a major player in the artifice versus bid for power. It was large and one of the largest temple forges, rivaling even that of Brashikon. Basically, they delved into the foul gods, and its demise was swift. Divine earthquakes tore the region apart, extinguishing the fire of the temple forge. Now, seaside ruins have eroded away, and it's near the Chilaxian fisherfolk of the Hinji state. And they've found some stuff over by there, cleared away finally. So, maybe there's something in that city. The ruins. Settlement. This is a very fun creature, a behemoth golem. A colossal construct that they created using their fiendish magic. Feared by all that would face it. That's the kind of thing that Jiskins knew. This monstrosity. That is a castle on its back. An actual castle. A stronghold. stat-wise, a CR-17 creature. Things like this remain hidden. Leftovers of their culture, of their science. This is the most notorious of all of them, but they have countless columns and constructs that they created over their years, and many of them still can exist in places today. Leftovers of an ancient kingdom. The thing is, these are a lot of what we have left over to exemplify what Jistka was. Unlike the ancient Assyrians, who have their big pyramids and stuff, the Jiskans were so utterly destroyed that things like their artifacts, their golems, are a lot of what we have left over. It's an unfortunate part about their culture that a lot of it has been lost to the ages with such massive wars and destructions. Yet, divine retribution upon their golem artificers for dealing with horrible fiendish magics. Completely destroyed and wiped out by their enemies. So very little remains. Fragments of their ruins. Scholars have to pick and choose their way through things, through ancient citadels, elementalist temples, things that are connected maybe to the elemental planes that may have retained some kind of things. Particular rooting out ancient genie or presence that might be in the area that maybe were connected to this, or ancient constructs that are there, making exploring these places incredibly dangerous. That is the problem of trying to explore and learn about the Jiskans. They're lost people, they're lost culture. Granted, again, the hanging city of Kaskara is such a place in the northern mountains. It's probably the best place you could look at their culture. The deep canyon, the great mountains, the oasis that they created. Fashioned from brass, copper gears, cogs, mimicking their living models. Leopards, parrots, baboons, bat. These clockwork creatures emulating the habitats and demeanors of the animals that they resemble. Still within the pleasure gardens. If you were living in this city, you at least had one mechanical creature, a cat or a dog at first. Granted, this may be an extreme, but it means that the wealthy, the affluent, the major parts of it, mechanical creatures and animals were just as good as normal ones. And cool balconies, places that it includes rock with mage-forged cold iron chains, magical nets, walls of stone-hard glass kept the menagerie, wind-up birds and beasts. And the mysterious ailment that caused the place to be finished? Who knows? When Imperten Tyke Rekendos entered the 12th year of his reign, he celebrated the anniversary of his ascension by opening the lavish feast and debauchery in his newly completed pleasure gardens that hang in the city. Per week, the halls of Teskret sounded with laughter and wild foreign music. Strange folk with all odd coloration and naked dwarfs were seen throughout, thronging the fallen. Sometime in the last night, an odd susurration was heard, and the Imperium light emerged from some recently planted bushes, becoming unknown to mortals and pious men. Marcus Caesarius, the general of Jisca's Third Legion, proclaimed a general fast following events and public penance for the infractions of thereafter departed ruler, surmounting the throne with a suitable time and taking wrath of his life as his own. So he basically died mysteriously and insanely, and the city fell into decline, and yes. But it's a show of the people there. So we look at Jistka today. What's left? Well, again, you have ruins like this, places that are remaining, and you can explore old places, just places that are probably destroyed on the edges of things, and would you find a lot there? Yes and no. There can be secrets to be discovered. But there are plenty of little ruins lining over. If you're looking for Jiskin, go to Rahadu. Plenty of places there that do exist. The Tomb of Emperors, Lost Umaro, Hanging City of Kesker. These are all remnants of it. In Cheliax, there's remnants on the coastline. There's still some influence, too. Basically, when Agilus Thellus reorganized the Hell Knights, he based his ranks and organizations on the legions of Jistka, interestingly enough. But it's more an homage to a group that had ruled over the Jiraxian region, rather than an actual respect for Jistka. Jistka is lost. It's gone. It is dead. I think that's a great place to leave that there. It is an empire that has truly and utterly crumbled. Many of the ancient empires, in the Golarion region, we know about today and have heavy influence. Think about the heavy influence the Aslanti people have, the Thessalonian people have, the ancient Osirian people have. They still hold influence. Jistka is one of the ancient empires, and one that should be respected that isn't. It was because it was so utterly destroyed by its enemies. The damage and destructions the Osirians and their allies did were so extreme. That's one of the reasons that their history is gone in a lot of ways, and their culture, and a lot of them have disappeared. They made really bad enemies, pissed them off a lot, and then just fought them tooth and nail when who knows what could have happened. Maybe they should have surrendered earlier. They could have saved some of their cities. There's a lot of questions onto it, the competition between all the ancient empires in this region, but Jistka's reach, its corruption, its wanted bloodshed that it had to spread its influence, all scream as to why it fell as much. They pushed boundaries and pissed people off. We assume that these are people of a Grundy ethnicity. It's the region they're in, the region they come from. But it's one of those things that there's so little that we know about Jistka and its people. They could have been a subculture, as far as we know. And that subculture could now easily be integrated into all the other cultures in the region of the continent. But we just don't know. There's so much lost to the ages in this case that we can't learn about and discuss. But I think it is interesting to look at in the historical aspect. And, hey, for those of you who are adventurers, pathfinders, and the like, any place to go visit, maybe find a little bit of ancient ruins, face some dangerous old golems, and learn about how to make one or two. I just wouldn't recommend finding a Jiskin behemoth golem, if any still exist. Sounds like a bad time. But that'll be it for today. I hope you enjoyed learning about the Jistka Imperium. Jistka Imperium. It's an interesting ancient empire that, I want to talk about some of these ancient empires because they link into the modern-day countries of Golarion, and they open up opportunities for exploration, and certainly for GMs to, hey, I'm going to have my players explore something. Jistka. Cool idea. If you want to go fight a bunch of golems, maybe some fiend golems, that's a cool idea. If you want to see more of my stuff, I have a schedule that goes up, and it tells you when I'm either live on Twitch or uploading stuff to YouTube. That schedule's up on my community page and my YouTube, but also on my social medias. That's on Discord, Blue Sky, X/Twitter. You can go see everything there. That's also got my updates of social media and stuff, scheduling changes, all those kind of things. The Twitch schedule, a little more up in the air, but that generally tells you what I'm doing on days. The YouTube schedule, a little bit more exact. That just tells you when things are being updated. Make sure to, as I said at the beginning, give a little support here with liking, subscribing, and the bell, and let me know what you think of the Jistka Imperium. Are you inspired by some adventures there, or as a character, do you think you'd want to go check out and face some of the dangers to go find some treasures there? There's probably plenty of really great stories that we can tell in many of these places. I personally kind of think the hanging kind of garden area would be really cool to go have some adventures in. The Hanging City. Sounds like a fun place to go to and have some adventures. Whether or not. Anyway, until the next time, I bid all of you out there a deep and wonderful farewell.